do some question and answer. If anybody wants to stick for a minute, it's up to you guys.
Quiz 1, 2.
We'll get James in here. Thank you. Anybody who didn't get a sheet on the way in? There are sheets that explain a little more out here. You want one? Yeah, give a sheet. I shall deliver. Thank you very much. James.
Are there any questions?
What's happening now?
So, of course, we have a new administration, and they appointed the first ever American Indian woman to head the Department of Interior. And I've got several short videos, and we've sent them to Deb Haaland, that's the new Secretary of the Interior. And I'm actually working with some of my Native friends to appeal to Deb. But Deb is buying the story that the BLM is giving her. And the numbers is where they really lie. As you may have heard in the film, the National Academy of Sciences, they did a very thorough study of the BLM wild horse and burro program. And one of their biggest findings was how they manipulate and lie about numbers. And one reason they do that is they get a bigger budget if they have more horses out there. So they always say there's more than they are. And Deb is buying that story. So there's actually going to be a big wild horse protest in the state of Utah on the 2nd of July. A lot of people are gathering out there. I think she will hear about that. And then I'm cutting a new film with a lot of Native people, and it just talks about the relationship of and the importance, the spiritual connection to the horse and the horse's history in North America. And then we're gonna get that to Deb. She's from New Mexico, and I have friends who know her down there. So hopefully that'll make a difference. But with the price of oil and gas going back up, they call it rare earth mining. Rare earth is used in computer cell phones. All of these things are, going up in price. So we're going to see a lot more development on Western public lands. So the battle will continue. Yes.
We can see how the public is managing these things. Obviously, it's not going in the direction that we want. I know over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a tremendous amount of private ownership. A lot of the people make gigs, constructors. How are they managing it in comparison to the public?
I think the best example would be Ted Turner. Ted Turner, he's a massive landowner. A lot of his ranches, he leases public lands from BLM. He's done a pretty good job of managing those lands. He's brought back the buffalo herds and things like that. Now, these are things I've heard through the grapevine. I haven't been out to see. But yes, some of these larger corporations, wealthy people, they have the resources to manage the lands better than your average person. And I think in some cases, they are improving the lands, but not in all cases.
And I was struck that at the end of your video, you gave a URL for BLM.gov, wild horses zoning. I mean, if they're not managing the money and the horses correctly now, why would we promote them taking money to?
That was not to donate, it was to adopt a wild horse. So, we have close to 50,000 wild horses in these holding facilities, which cost the American taxpayers about $125,000 a day. So, it's kind of a catch-22. I mean, by adopting a horse, you're kind of helping their program, but at the same time, you're saving that horse.
So I'm saying, you talk about that budgeting numbers and budgeting facts. I just find it pretty transparent that they say they're gonna attack the horse when we're sending it to Mexico. That seems to be counter too.
Yeah, when they send them to Mexico, they're going out the back door. They're telling the taxpayers that they're taking good care of them. But as you saw in the investigation, Ken Salazar, he was working with his neighbor out in Colorado, Tom Davies, and he was saying, "Hey, Tom, come and get these horses, get them off our hands." And the Inspector General's investigation, showed the foul play. That's one instance that was exposed, but there's a lot of that going on. They call them kill buyers, and they buy these horses for very cheap and then send them to slaughter. So
How much land do those horses need to live on and survive and be healthy?
it just depends on how much graze is out there. Right now, I just came from the American West, and it's just the driest, most parched I've ever seen it. And there's just huge concerns of forest fires this year, so the graze is down. And then you have the livestock industry, cattle, sheep. There's big competition for the graze now, so that that reduces habitat. But the good thing about wild horses is they spread seeds through their manure. They have a long intestine that it doesn't really break down the seeds, where the cows have the four-chambered stomach, which pretty much destroys everything that they eat. So horses repatriate seeds, they spread them around. They're very good at mitigating fire hazards in the West. The horses, as long as they're allowed to roam, they're pretty good for the landscape. And what's so important for people to understand is there is a huge underpopulation of wild horses. And I was just filming in Wyoming before I came here in the Red Desert Complex. It's a massive land area. And I drove for 3 days, looked everywhere, and I found 3 family bands. That was it. And last year, wildlife biologist Craig Downer, he's the foremost wildlife biologist on wild horses, he and I filed a lawsuit to stop the Red Desert Roundup last year, and they pretty much wiped out that herd. And it's really sad because the genetics in that herd was really amazing. That was along the Oregon Trail. So you had a lot of the horses from the pioneers that mixed in with the Indian horses. The horses are just beautiful out there, but they're almost gone now.
Why the impact of the horses? Why do they want to eradicate the horses? How are they impacting the lives? Why can't they coexist?
Exactly, why can't they? They should be coexisting. The big thing is the fracking. There's a lot of wastewater from that. Same with the mining, and this has happened. The horses will drink the wastewater, they'll colic and die. So they're an indicator species, and the corporations they don't want any trace. Or also the public likes to go and see them. So if you have wild horses in an area that's being mined or fracked, then there is the conflict between people who are standing up for the horses and what's going on the land. The public lands are being privatized. That's really what's happening. And as we mentioned in the film, the second largest form of income for the United States government is the leasing of public lands. So it's a huge moneymaker. And then you saw the Clinton uranium scandal. I mean, that whole deal was done with public lands. And those kinds of things are going on all the time out with public lands. And it doesn't really change from administration to administration. It pretty much remains the same. There's just too much money involved.
So what is your hope?
Good question. Yes, I hope that the government and people see that the wild horse is an asset and that the wild horses can help replenish parched western lands, help replant seeds, help mitigate fire damage, and that the herds can come back. Because what we really have to do is rebuild a lot of these areas in the West. They've been overmined, overfracked, overgrazed. And now with climate change getting worse and worse, we really have to focus on how to repair these places, and the wild horse can play a big part in that. And they're valuable to people. In the old days, they would go out and round them up, and that would be their horse. For all the the different people that lived there, the pioneers, the Indians. That wild horse that I adopted, he's just an amazing horse, and they're smart because they live in the wild. They're super smart, and once they take you on as a family member because they grow up in family bands. They're very connected as a family unit. So I encourage people, if you really want a great horse, wild horse can be an amazing horse to adopt. They are a lot of work. I mean, you're training a wild animal, so don't think you're going to be riding it in a week. If you're willing to put in the time in a couple months, you could train it well and be able to work with that horse. Yes, in the back.
We have a local man who has trained wild horses as part of this 100-day program. A few years ago, I saw the film that was made documenting that wild horse, wild ride.
Yes.
How did that program begin? Are those horses from these unfortunate roundups?
They are. That is a program. It's called the National Heritage. I believe it's the National Heritage Foundation. They do work with the BLM, and they have this competition. And the horsemen get a horse for 90 days, 3 months, and then you take it to the competition. People are doing amazing things with these horses that they're adopting. And it's a good program to motivate people to adopt wild horses. So I see that as a good thing. But again, I'll always go back and say there's an underpopulation of wild horses on public lands.
It would seem at some point that would be detrimental to the overall herds of the wild horses.
Right.
And it's one thing to see a well-trained, domesticated animal, but as you illustrate in the film, the real beauty, the real special thing is the wildness of these gorgeous animals.
It is. It's amazing. I mean, if you ever get an opportunity to spend time with them, it's just amazing. Michael Blake said it so well, the author of Dances with Wolves. He said, my mind was blown when I saw a real wild horse, and it's true. I mean, they are so different than domesticated horses. But I think it is good to show that they can be valuable to humans, as adopted animals. That's important. But we have to bring the herds back. And it can be done. It's not that difficult. So it's just.
It seems not only important to bring them back, but to stop the medical experimentation they're doing on them.
That's true. They're doing all kinds of very brutal techniques to basically stay the mares. And the PZP drug, it just has a dramatic effect on, the way they have evolved over thousands of years. And they're family units, and all of a sudden you tamper with that. They don't have a need for each other because they're not raising children, basically. And again, they're overusing the PZP drug right now as well. A lot of these wild horse advocates will say, oh, PZP is the answer. But yes, if you truly have an overpopulation, it can be used. But there is no overpopulation. So they're messing with thousands of years of genetics, and you clearly saw it in the film. And the herd out in Spring Creek, I was out there about 6 weeks ago, and they seem and act depressed. Yes.
But do you feel comfortable living back in the United States, or do you feel like you're always looking over your shoulder that the government's still watching you, or different groups are watching you for your safety?
Yeah, I watch my back all the time. I was telling Julian the story.
That's why I'm standing over here.
That's what worries us right now, I'm telling you what.
Stay away from the.
Well, there's a number of things going on. These private security firms like Blackwater are being hired by big corporations to do surveillance on activists, and then what I am is I'm a filmmaker, I'm a journalist, but I've been, they point the finger at me and say eco-terrorist and things like this, troublemaker. And so yes, you have to be very careful. A friend of mine he's retired now, but he was a senior investigator, United States Marshal, and he did security work for the Clintons. And when he saw this film, he said, I can't believe you're still alive. So anyhow, and that was.
I do say there's hope in the sense of historically you can't compete against the PR companies to the large energy companies in the US government. You never could break that deal. But now with social media, I mean, we see what they've done to straws, we see what they've done to save the turtles. I mean, you can do a lot through social media. Are you working with anybody to help get this in a kind of a package to get it out there? Because I personally saw the straws start in Hawaii, go to California, then across the East Coast, and that happened fast.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Social media is the most powerful tool we have. In my case, because I'm exposing the government, censorship is very real in this country, especially through social media now. And I can tell you they're limiting my streams. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook, and then I have built the Vimeo on demand page. And I go much deeper than most wild horse advocates go. And so I'm experiencing censorship and have for a number of years. At the same time, I'm actively seeking more people to help me with the social media. I don't think new platforms are arising now that promise not to censor people like me. So we'll keep doing that. We'll keep working on the social media platforms.
That colt that was born out of its normal season, it seemed misshapen even. Its spine was not right.
Yeah,
Is that due to the drug, or was it due to the being out of season?
I think it had more to do with the cold weather. It was very frigid that day. I think the body was hypertense, but that was very tragic. Anyhow, but that is an example of what PZP can do. Yeah.
How about the wild ponies of acetate and Ocracoke are you acquainted with circumstances there?
I know about those horses, and it's my understanding that they do use the PZP birth control drug there because, of course, it's an island. There's only so much room. I can't tell you about the health and well-being of the horses there. I just don't know.
I just wondered if there's been a move for, environmental tourism. So, to bring people on safari, so to speak, and to see this, and if that is a solution that anybody's looked at.
So Madeline Pickens, who was married to the oil tycoon T. Boone Pickens, she has started a wild horse sanctuary in Nevada, and that's exactly what she's doing. She's created kind of a small resort out there, ecotourism. So that is an example of it happening. These other public lands, I keep telling the ranchers, I'm like, you guys should start an Airbnb and take people out on tours. It would be another great source of income for you guys. Run a few less cattle and do that. And some of them, you can kind of see them thinking a little bit, but,
Are you familiar with Icelandic horses? When we were in Iceland, we said they don't have any other horses in the country.
Yes, I've been to Iceland, I have filmed the horses, and like you say, they really protect those horses. They don't want, any foreign diseases or anything coming in there. Those horses are an incredible example of survival. Their manes, their tails are very, furry and thick, their coats are thick, and they're a gaited horse, they're very easy to ride. So that's a wonderful example of an old horse species. And they look a lot like the old the horses that were here during the last ice age. If you look at the recreated pictures of those old horses, they look very similar to the Icelandic horses.
Are they like Peruvian possibly?
Well, they're a little smaller, and they have much more hair, for the cold, because they're way up there in Iceland. Where Peruvians are, they're a Spanish horse, so much less hair. Yes.
Is there a solution, a resolution to get the horses that are rounded up government out in the hands of people who have ranches or they just lock the seats there?
People can adopt horses, and if you do have a large tract of land, you can write a letter to the BLM and say, I have X amount of land and I would like to adopt, whatever, 10 or 20 horses. And after they review, if they can see that you can actually do that, they will. They will. Not in all cases. You gotta pass whatever their outlines are, but people can do that. Yeah, and again, we wish that, like Ted Turner, we had hoped he would adopt wild horses. He's not interested at all. So.
It just seems like a lot of devastation in that. And thank you for your beauty and your perseverance and your courage.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's kind of a love-hate relationship. I love being out on the land with the horses and doing this kind of film work, but then dealing with the government is just hell.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was very moving, very emotional.
Thank you. Julian.
I have a question and a comment. How many people here thought that the horses came to North America with the Spaniards? That's not true.
Yeah.
Yeah, the birthplace, the horse evolved in North America. There is the Museum of Beringia. It's up in the Yukon of Canada. Amazing museum, and they've unearthed all of these horses in the permafrost, and clearly shows the horse has been here a long time. And then there's a Native American scholar who just released a PhD thesis study, and he just goes into the deep history of the horse being here, all the early accounts of the first explorers who actually did document and write in their journals that Indians had horses. The main reason a lot of that was covered up is the royalty back in Europe didn't want the people to know that the natives had a developed horse culture because that would make them human. You know, they were really pushing it off as savages to be conquered, but the natives did have an advanced horse culture here. So they've always been here. Obviously, when the Spanish brought horses, it was an injection of more horses into the continent. They brought the Spanish barbs, and those horses did incredibly well in the Southwest. Okay, well, thank you so much, and please get a handout. They're on the table outside, and we tell you how to write Deb Holland. That's probably the best thing you do is write her a letter, call her office, and because the more her phone rings about this, the more likely she's likely to take some action on it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But I am lucky. Didn't know they would do that.
Good to see you, brother. Thanks again.